Think about that pick and how you think he'll be in the league.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think he's clearly the top quarterback. I think he'd be a fun guy to develop. I think there's a fair case to be made that he has both the highest floor and the highest ceiling of the quarterbacks here. So I think he's ready to play. He's played a lot of football. He'll be able to get in and get going. But I still think there's a lot of growth there he can improve. So I think he'd be a fun guy to work with.
Why do you think there's so much variation in the opinions on the offensive tackles in this class? Some people, like Campbell's higher, Miller's higher, Banks is even different things.
Well, I don't think we have a premier guy. I think in years past where you might have kind of a guy who checks all of the boxes and there's not as many concerns or questions, it makes it easier to stack. And so all these guys have pluses and all of them have warts. So some people value those differently, and that's why you're seeing the difference in terms of the rankings. It's, like Will Campbell is going to be a high floor guy. Like I kind of know what you're getting there. In worst case scenario, he kicks inside and plays guard. Membu has just a lot more on his body, like a lot more physical talent. And Banks is probably in the middle of both of them. He gives you a little bit of the talent and then gives you a little bit of the floor there. So that's why I think that the rankings are all over the place.
So what do you do if you're the Bears at 10 and you're looking at 4 or 5 potential first-round offensive tackles? You got to pick your guy.
Well, I was talking to somebody in their building yesterday, and I just said these decisions are going to get made for you. So at some time you don't have to sit there and wonder who's 1, 2, or 3. It's just going to be who's potentially there, and then weighing that with other options at other positions. But they've done a good job of kind of getting the baseline taken care of, that I don't feel like they have that proverbial gun to their head where they have to go one specific position at that point in time. So I think they can be patient, let it fall to them, and go with what's best available.
Do you think because of what they've done offensive line-wise during the offseason, they're in a position where maybe a skill guy is the best choice for them, especially with Ben Johnson coming in, the offense that he runs?
Absolutely. Just to get specifically, if Ashton Genty's there, I'd turn the card in and let this young quarterback, young Roma Dunze, now you get Ashton Genty, let these guys kind of grow up together. I love that idea if he were to get there. So again, I just think take the highest grade guy. If you have a high grade on the tight end, one of the 2 tight ends, take one of the 2 tight ends. I don't think, Cole Kmet's a good player, but I don't think that's something that would stop you from taking a tight end if that's who you have the highest grade on.
What do you think is Genty's ceiling? Like, would you trade up for him? Do you think he's kind of in a special category? How would you grade him?
Well, to me, if he had done more in the passing game, I'd be willing to just say, okay, yeah, let's go get him. As a runner, I love him. In the passing game, I think that's still a little bit TBD to see what that's going to look like. I love him. I have no problem sticking and picking him. And if you could move up a little bit to get him, I don't know that I'm mortgaging future picks to go up and get him at that position at this point.
What do you think the Packers will do with the 23rd overall pick?
Yeah. Well, look, there's 2 names that I've come down to. Shedeur Stewart is someone I feel like they have a lot of love for out of Texas A&M, the pass rusher. Maxwell Harrison, the corner out of Kentucky. Jair Alexander, we'll see what happens with him. That gives you some insurance there. So those 2 guys, usually with the Packers, just find an athletic SEC defensive player and then drop him in there because that's what they like to do.
How much did Cam grow at Miami this year, and do you feel like he is a plug-and-play immediate guys?
Yeah. Every year he got better. Along his journey, he continued to just improve and get better every year. And I think he's played enough football. He's poised. That's usually a thing with guys getting on the field. Like, how is their poise? Is it going to be too big for him? I think he'll be fine. I would put him in there. You're going to have some bumpy road there early on, but he's, everything I've heard, mentally, physically tough enough to handle it.
At least with the start with him, and maybe the whole quarterback class, people said, it's not as good as last year, not as good as some years. It seems like he's really emerged. Does that mean he's just the best of a bad group, or is he actually a bona fide number 1 pick at this point?
Well, look, you're in your class, so he's in this class makes sense as the first overall pick. As a quarterback, I think he's got a chance. I kind of look at it in tiers. I think he's got a chance to be a top 12 quarterback in the NFL. He has that type of ability, those type of tools. So, yeah, no, I think you stack him up. And last year was a special group, and I don't know if we'll see a group like that in quite some time. So I always hate kind of taking one player from this year and putting him in last year. It's all about, can he start, can he be productive, and I think he's got a chance to be a top 12.
What do you think Luther Burden's draft stock has dropped, and can you just talk about the relationship with Coach Drinkwitz and the job he does in Missouri?
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily dropped. I always am a little bit skeptical of that because teams have it different than than the media might have them. I think he's going to go 20 to 35. Like, he's going to be a late first-round pick or go in the top of the 2nd round. And I talk to Drink all the time. He loves him. He sells him, and he's talking to teams and selling them to teams and sending out practice footage and all those things. So he's going to be a good player. I told him, I was like, there's receivers every year in the second round that end up being special players. Ladd McConkey was a great example last year. So I just tell the kid, be excited of where you go, not when you go, and he's got a chance to have a great career.
Going back to the Packers, with them having a 23rd overall pick, could you see them being more aggressive and trading up? And if so, do you see them going offense or defense? I know they kind of need both in those playoffs.
Yeah, I would say defense. I don't know how aggressive. I don't know this is that draft to be super aggressive, but if the cost is limiting, you're talking about, maybe it's a 4th round pick to move up a couple spots, I could see that happening. In terms of a big, bold move and going up, I don't know that that's necessarily in the cards.
And more overarching, you've been a part of a bunch of NFL drafts. Just what makes it special having it at Green Bay, just the history, especially?
Yeah, I literally woke up in my hotel and I roll up the blinds and it's Lambeau Field. And I grew up in San Diego, and this is a place that's kind of holy ground. So I remember my first time being in this building, and it's football, and it feels right. And I actually, even as a soft San Diego kid, enjoy a little bit cooler weather.
Where do you think the Lions' priorities are in 2018?
They've done a lot of work on interior offensive line. I think if Booker were to get there from Alabama, they'd run the card up. Donovan Jackson's another one I think makes a lot of sense for them. But they've done a lot of nice work in that organization, building up the lines, and they went out and got the skill and plugged in the skill. And it feels like now it's kind of a full circle, like, okay, it's time to reinvest here at the line of scrimmage.
It feels like there's less pressure on Brett Holmes to hit a home run in the first round now based on what they've done in the past few years.
Brett Holmes just needs to do whatever he's doing. Wake up, eat the same meal you've had before all these other drafts, and just don't change anything, because what he's been doing has been working.
DJ, what's your anticipation level for John Spytek and Pete Carroll as they attack this draft for the first time together?
Yeah, I'm excited. I've known Spytek for a long time. I have a lot of respect for him and excited for him to get this opportunity. And then Pete, everybody thought that was it, and he's like, no, I got another chapter in me. So I'm excited to see if they take kind of guys that are going to help this team right now, or are we going to kind of look, a little more into the future? To me, I don't think you hire Pete Carroll and bring in Geno Smith unless you're trying to win right now. And so that's why, people kind of look at the running back option, and it makes a lot of sense.
When you mentioned last year's quarterback class, how do you look back on that a year later now that they've all played the season, Caleb and Jaden?
I would say there's been a couple that have exceeded expectations. I think Bo Nix would be at the top of that list. Look, Jaden is. I thought Jaden would hit the ground running and be the best of the group initially, and not only was that, but he was just at such a stratospheric level that was surprising to me of how great he was. I haven't changed my opinion at all on Caleb Williams. I think he's got all the ability in the world. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think Drake May, with what he had nothing last year, as they continue to build up around him, I think he's going to be really good. So I haven't really wavered on my opinion on any of those guys. Penix is still TBD. We haven't seen enough of him yet, but I thought that group was pretty dynamite coming into the process, and I haven't changed my mind.
So long term with Caleb and Jaden, see that the same way you did before the draft?
Yeah. I mean, look, Caleb had the year I expected him to have, where there's going to be high highs and low lows, a little bit of a bumpy ride, but you would see the flashes and the moments where this is really exciting. And if they could, make field goals, stop field goals, not screw things up at the end of games, that they would be looking at him a lot differently. It's like, look at these comeback wins that he had, but that's a tangent. I won't go off on that. But he's going to be just fine. I'm not worried about him in the least, and I'm excited to see what Ben's going to do with him and how they're going to develop the offense around him.
So Dan, last year's draft, crazy at the top of quarterbacks, 6 in the top 12 picks.
Yeah.
A lot of jockeying for the quarterbacks. Fair to say that this year the jockeying for the quarterbacks could come at the end of the first, early second round?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a chance there. I don't know how much action we'll see. I think there's a chance maybe we get one in terms of some movement to go up. I just feel like it's hard to reconcile if he's not good enough to take up there at the top of the draft, how you're going to mortgage a lot of picks to then come back in and take him later on in the draft. It's tough to get around that. But I do think there's a chance one team does it. I don't know if we'll see more than that. I think a lot of these teams have high second round picks. There's a handful of quarterbacks that are intriguing flyers. So just sit and see who's there. And at that point in time, it's just like a lottery ticket.
Do you expect the Shedeur, the Milroe, Dart, all those guys to be gone by early second round at that point?
I would say I don't think they'll all be gone. I think there's going to be a couple of those guys go, but I've just seen this so many times over the years where we've naturally assumed these guys all run off the board, and there's not much of a middle class when it comes to quarterbacks. Usually it's first round, maybe a one-off in the second round, and then usually you're getting down to the third, fourth round before we see the next group of guys. So I think it's a little optimistic to think that all of this group of quarterbacks are all going to go in the top 35, 40 picks. Fanatics.
What do you see as the range for Shedeur?
He's got a wide range. I mean, there's people that still think he's going to play at 3. So I would be stunned if that happened. But then you get to 21, and if he doesn't go 21 to Pittsburgh, I don't have a landing spot for him in the first round. So you're talking about I don't know if I can say a range in years past where a guy could be anywhere from 3 to 35. That's kind of what it feels like.
Why is the success of quarterbacks in the NFL is just that abysmal? I mean, we take guys year after year, and there's not a lot of success. Why do you think that there's so many misses on quarterback?
I think a lot of times, well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's quite that drastic. We've seen some young guys come in and have some success. C.J. Stroud, comes right to mind, jumped right on the field and got them going. You saw it last year with Bo Nix taking the team to the playoffs. Jaden Daniels goes to a conference championship. So I wouldn't put a blanket statement on it that way, but I would say we spend a lot of time evaluating the quarterback and not as much time evaluating the fit. And if you don't have it around you, then that's going to be the problem. I've always used the phrase, there's the 3 Ps. You need to have a great play caller, you need to have great protection, and you need to have some playmakers. And if you look at the guys that hit, they usually have all 3. At minimum, they have 2. And if you look at the guys that bust, a lot of times they don't have any of those 3 things.
So Caleb Williams should be successful with Ben Johnson.
Caleb Williams now has a great play caller. They've invested to improve the protection, and they've got playmakers. So I think this is going to be a big year.
Dan, with
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be patient to see who falls to them. Selfishly, I would like to see Tyler Warren as an option there, just see how creative they can get and run out some 12 personnel, 2 tight end stuff. I just think he'd be a fun toy to have in that offense. But I mean, nobody's really talked about Colston Loveland there, and Colston Loveland probably is more similar to Sam Laporta, who Ben Johnson was with in Detroit. So that could be an option, and then you've got Ashton Genty as a fun one as well. I'm assuming the tackles are going to go. I think the tackles are going to fly off the board. I don't think there's a second tier that excites people. So if you're looking at it saying, I want a tackle and a tight end, it behooves you to take the tackle first, and you'll have a tight end in the second round versus that group of tackles in the second round. You're not going to want to run out there next year.
What are your thoughts on Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson, the cornerbacks?
Yeah, look, I'm a Barron guy. I love Barron, what he brings to the table. I think he's a nickel. Some teams, have always just kind of put those guys a little lower if they're not going to be outside corners. But if you look at all the playoff teams, look at the nickels for all those playoff teams. They're really impactful players and valuable players. So I'm a fan of his. I think he could slide a little bit. He's my 10th player. He could go in the 20s. That wouldn't shock me. Will Johnson, if you go off, have the draft off of 23, he's a top 10 pick. But this year, you've got not only injury, you've got the speed showed up in some games that was an issue. Tackling wasn't as good. So when you factor in not having a healthy process and the tape this year was kind of just okay, I think there's a fair chance he could slide.
So you talk about the position scarcity at offensive tackle. Is that why, if you're the Patriots, probably just take one for you?
I just think that's what they're doing. I mean, they can't. I mean, I don't want to be insulting, but they can't run out there with what they had last year. They cannot do that. So to me, I feel like they of a team that has a definite need that they must fill and they must do it early. The Patriots and left tackle has to be solved.
And so Will Campbell, him getting jersey number 7, what does that tell you?
Well, everybody at LSU raves about him. I've got guys there that have been at LSU for 30 years, and the group of players who've just gone right onto the field and been starters day one, have never been replaced, don't miss practices. Like, that's a very rare list of players, and that's what he's done. And he's got some uneven tape this year where he got some guys got on his edges and he gave up some stuff, so he's not a perfect player. But to me, you're buying the kid more than anything else, and absolute nuclear worst case scenario, you got yourself a stud guard. That's the worst case.
Quick question on the Lions.
Thank you.
Chargers receiver. Do you look at receivers as a huge area of need, and what kind of guy might fit here?
I just think they need to get faster, Sam. They've got to get more explosive. I thought that was on display in the playoff game. You had Ladd McConkey, and that was kind of it. So, to me, getting somebody that can really run, take the top off the defense, hit some home runs with Justin, and then that's also just going to clear up space in the middle of the field. So, a field stretching receiver makes sense to me, and then also a tight end that can win. They've got to get guys that can win man-to-man. When they're playing man teams, McConkey's really been the one guy who can separate and get away from that. So if you're gonna play them in man coverage, they've got to find somebody that can separate, and that could be the tight end as well. So like Colston Loveland, if you say what's the home run pick for them, it's Loveland.
Not McMillan? I think McMillan had such a season last year that I would take a dominating wide receiver over I played tight end. I was the Jets' 15th pick overall in 1992.
Nice.
My name is Johnny Mitchell.
Oh yeah, John. Good to see you,
And
man.
we share this with
Yeah.
I think McMillan is a Mike Evans cup. That's just my opinion. What do you think about that?
So Mike was two things. Mike was much physically stronger than McMillan,
Gotcha.
and Mike was much quicker than McMillan.
Gotcha.
So as you know, when you get press coverage,
Yes,
you have to
you gotta
win
beat
one
it.
of two ways. You have to be strong enough to power through it, or you've got to be quick enough to get away from it. And that's my concern with McMillan. He's got unbelievable range and ball skills down the field, very talented. But Mike was a much more physical, much quicker player, both big guys. I like McMillan. I average like my 15th or 16th player. But to me, those tight ends, they
But
win.
the separation as a tight end now with the nickel and all the coverage, like you say,
Yeah.
11 and 12 personnel, I think is very difficult. You got to be able to separate. I don't see the speed at those two tight ends you're talking about.
I think Loveland can do that. That's what
He
kind
has
of, that's
the
what
speed.
that's what kind of
What
tight
was
end
his
Love
40 in
is.
the combine?
Neither one of them ran. But I can tell.
What are their individual timing at their university?
I can tell you right now, McMillan ran low 4.6s, and I will tell you that Loveland's faster than McMillan.
Daniel, what's your sense for the Vikings at 24? What they could be going there?
The Vikings at 24, to me, I look at on the front. I know they went out and got 2 D tackles, and so I think some people have kind of crossed that off the list. I could see them doubling down and going there. I love Harrison. I don't know how much longer Harrison Phillips is going to be there, but he'll be a great mentor if you're going to bring in a young guy. They've got some veterans in that room. Derek Harmon makes some sense to me from that standpoint. I think they went out and got the offensive line in pretty good shape. I still think they could take another interior offensive lineman as well. We'll see what happens with Booker.
So Lions at 28. Brad Holmes emphasizes best player available. Can you see him getting some value in this draft, and can they not miss on 2 players in this draft? Brad Holmes.
Well, I mean, Brad does the work. Like, he gets out and sees these guys and does his homework. He's got a great feel for it, not only the player but the fit in terms of the guys they're bringing in. If their first 2 picks were, an interior offensive lineman and an edge rusher, to me that's like the perfect mix of guys. And I think where they're picking, there's a good chance you're going to get value at both those positions.
Do you see a log jam at 28 with edge rusher and wide receiver?
I think we're going to see a run on edge rushers towards the bottom of 1. I think the receivers, I could see a little bit more of a run in the the teens, early 20s. And then I think the end of the first round, I think you're going to see corners, edge rushers. I think that's going to dominate the bottom.
For the Bears at 10, if they wanted to move up, how expensive do you think it would be if they were dead set on getting Jet? And or do you think anybody would want to come up and they can maybe move back and get one of the tight ends you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what the prices would be this year. Usually the prices for quarterbacks go up. If you're moving up for a quarterback, teams are going to make you pay a premium. With that not being the case this year, I would think that a team like Jacksonville would be more willing to maybe come, underperform on the chart to get out of there if they wanted to potentially get up there to 5. What that cost would be, I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the chart. It's not cheap, but I don't think they'd have to pay a premium is what I'm getting at.
Hey Daniel, for the New York Jets at pick number 7, you've had Tyler Warren, Mock, Armand Membu, but there's buzz that the Jets could go defense at pick number 7. What have you been hearing, and where do you think the Jets end up going at pick 7?
Yeah, look, they very well could go on the defensive side of the ball. Barron to me is a fun player. It would be interesting in that mix. When I just go and stack up the grades and kind of where some of their issues they could solve, I just keep coming back to 2 players. I come back to Membu as an option, and I come back to Warren. That feels like what that decision will be. We can all be prepared to be surprised, but I think Membu kind of officially solves the offensive line, plug-and-play right tackle to go along with all the other good young offensive linemen they've invested in. It makes a lot of sense.
Assuming Warren goes quickly, do you think Loveland would be around in the 20s?
I don't think so. I think there's some teams really hot on him. I will keep an eye on Denver. I think the Colts at 14, is the spot. So if he gets beyond the Colts, to me, if you're the Chargers and you want Loveland, I think you have to get up in front of Denver. And with Denver got Evan Ingram, I do not think that will stop them at all from going after Colston Loveland.
The 49ers.
How do you think the Jim coaching? I mean, is that?
It's proof of concept. I think there's a very real chance that they could be on the clock, and you could have Kenneth Grant from Michigan. In a perfect scenario, somehow Loveland gets to him, and then if Will Johnson's sliding because of what's going on through the draft process, I don't know how Jim would function if he had 3 Michigan guys and only 1 selection. It would be like biblical about splitting the baby.
The 49ers are picking at 11, kind of a peculiar spot with the top 10 and how it's shaken out. What do you kind of see as the best fit for them at that spot with the talent that will likely be available?
Yeah, talking to folks around the league, there's a lot of expectation of line of scrimmage, O-line, D-line. Walter Nolan fits Chris Kasurik's style of play up front really, really well. That wouldn't shock me at all. I'm a Gray Zabel fan. I love Gray Zabel. I just think you're getting ready to pay Brock Purdy a whole lot of money. And I don't know how much longer Trent's going to be there. You've got an offensive line. You lose Banks. Like, to me, investing somewhere along that offensive line, I think would be a smart move. I'm a Gray Zabel guy.
You don't think 11's too rich for Zabel? I'm a Gray Zabel fan as well. He's
I
really
don't
good.
have him as my, in that ranking. I have him I love him, but he's a little bit lower, more so in the 20s. But I just look at certain teams and the direction they need to go. In ideal world, you trade back and take him.
Right.
But if you can't find a partner, I would have no problem if they just sat and picked Gray Zabel.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about trade